Awesome. So we are just going to have a chat about our experience building NFT games. I guess we'll talk about sort of the case study of Gods Unchained, and we're really happy to field questions from, seems like a pretty small and intimate group. So yeah, happy to get into some niche stuff as well. Awesome. So a bit of introduction. I am Robbie, one of the co-founders here at Fuel Games. This is Alex, our lead engineer, who can also provide help with really hard or technical questions, as he's a bit of a genius. So I think we'll start out by talking about what the advantages of NFTs we see in the industry and where we think they'll go in the future, and then a bit of our experience building out NFTs in games and sort of the challenges we faced, challenges we think that are unsolved in the industry currently, and what we're working on. And then maybe do a bit of a Q&A, but we're also very happy to field questions at any point throughout. I'm just noticing the GEDX guy as well in the chat, so shout out to David. So I think one of the most interesting things that we saw about NFTs was fundamentally the ability for digital assets to have the same ownership properties as physical assets in the real world. I know both of us were quite big gamers when we were younger, and one of our favorite parts about economies in video games was that they were essentially defined after a certain period of time. And then you've seen lots of quite mature games like EVE Online or RuneScape that the in-game economies are the ones that are the most interesting aspects of the game. They're the most long-lasting aspects of the game. And so what NFTs enables is...
Looked at that game as...
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you weren't asking a question?
No, I wasn't, sorry.
Okay, easy. Yeah, so the most valuable properties about those games will all be enhanced by having true digital ownership. So last year, the secondary market capitalization of digital assets and video games was in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So it's very much a serious market, and yet at the same time, these video game publishers and these companies act as a centralized bank with absolutely no regulation or oversight. They're able to print items with impunity. They're able to manipulate the value of items. They are able to create infinite marginal value in order to prevent people from churning all of the expense of the user's value. And we see this particularly in the highly exploitative gacha systems of the mobile gaming industry, where everything's designed to take the last cent and last penny off the player in order to maximize profits. And so I think that we're going to see increasingly a shift towards this new system as the industry becomes disrupted, and there's this radically higher value proposition where players can actually own their digital assets, which has been awesome, made possible by, I guess, non-fungible tokens. There are a bunch of other characteristics of NFTs we're super excited about. Provenance is one of the main ones, the ability to actually track the heritage of an item throughout its life cycle, which offers a potential way to revolutionize distribution to like streamers. Imagine if you could take the exact digital asset that Ninja won a Fortnite competition with, and then he could sell that or auction that off live on Twitch, and people would be purchasing it for the heritage of that item. In the same way that the glove that Muhammad Ali used to knock out George Foreman is far more valuable than other gloves of that same kind, printed in the same year. They're functionally identical, but the history attached to that item and its unique context throughout time gives it a secondary value which is higher than its primary value. I think we saw some really interesting imperatives for true ownership as well last year and over the past few years. For instance, in Hearthstone, there were cases of people having their cards nerfed and then not even having the value of those nerfed cards refunded to them. And increasingly, we see these gaming publishers act with impunity in the ways that we operate. We saw a really interesting experiment as well with Valve's Artifact, which was attempting to have true tradability, but because it was caught in that liminal space between gaming publisher having absolute authority over the gaming items on a server and attempting to provide true tradability, you didn't get an effective model for the game. They joined 98.5% of their users in the first 3 months because they were stuck trying to create a model where players could own things, but also where they retain full rights over those items. The future lies in a model where players retain true ownership, and the economy has to be designed around that from ground up. It's not something that we've seen analogies in video games before, and I think that's why perhaps that experiment didn't go as well as they thought it might.
We're having some sound quality issues. Is my mic any better, or is it an issue with Rob's headset?
I think you guys sound fine, but I hear some typing in the backgrounds. It's gone now.
Try moving the mic a little closer, potentially, Rob.
Yeah, I think that should be good now. We can't do much more on our end, I don't think. Is that better, Ru?
Yeah, the audio sounds pretty good on our end. Also, I'm recording this, and I can edit it to make the audio sound a bit clearer once I release this recording. So,
yeah, awesome. So I might hand off to Alex for a moment to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we faced building, I guess, what we wanted to be the first AAA game on the blockchain, and a really next level of experience that was an order of magnitude better than some of the web experiences we'd seen before. Some of the difficulties we faced, how we overcame them. So maybe, randomness, talking about balancing off-chain versus on-chain properties, our philosophies toward openness.
Yeah. So we decided that we wanted to make Gods Unchained be something which hadn't really even been attempted to that point in terms of crypto games, in that we wanted NFTs not just to be in-game assets, but actually to be in-game assets in a game which people would play regardless of the status of the assets, right? So previously in crypto games, people have just kind of sort of made a game. It's not particularly much fun to play in and of itself, and it doesn't really have any of the sort of the knowledge that gaming publishers do have about how to create enjoyable experiences, how to make players actually have fun, sustained, and engaging experiences with the actual gameplay of the game. And so we decided we wanted to have that, and on top of that, add what Rob just talked about in terms of how do we let players actually own their assets, right? And so to do that, we had to solve quite a few challenges, particularly regarding randomness, regarding blockchain UX, regarding how we communicate lots of the messaging around the game to the user. And lots of these challenges are things that we've made good progress on, and it's ones that we're looking to solve in even more effective ways in the future. So to start off with that, so the way that we launched Gods Unchained, we didn't have an ICO, we didn't have anything of that nature. What we did was we had a pre-sale. So in the same way that a game like Hearthstone sells packs, in the same way that Magic the Gathering for many years has sold sort of physical card packs of cards, we decided to sell a number of card packs which you could purchase off us. And to make that a really enjoyable and engaging experience for the player, we created a full experience around that so that you could open the cards in the browser. You'd have sort of a very high quality animation experience. And so that has a number of technical challenges. Firstly, in how we communicate with the blockchain, and secondly, with how we actually sort of render the cards in real time, how we reduce the time it takes from you click the button, which is purchase the cards, to you are able to open those cards and have the polished temple experience. And if you haven't seen what that experience looks like, feel free to check out the site, godsunchained.com, or there's plenty of videos on YouTube for you to check out afterwards. So a few of the key problems that we faced. So the first one was in terms of the expensiveness, or how much gas it costs to actually create an NFT. So at the time when we were launching the Gods Unchained pre-sale, there was a lot of congestion on the Ethereum network. So there was, I'm not sure, some people might remember sort of an F-coin incident where gas prices were sort of about 100 gwei for several weeks consistently. There were some sort of things being set up to make it quite to try to incentivize people to spend as much gas as they could, which essentially made it really, really expensive for anyone else to send a transaction on the net. Okay. And one of the things that NFTs require is several sort of store operations on the blockchain, so that you're saving various information about the user which owns the token's position in an array of tokens, and various things like that, which enable us to actually implement the ERC-721 interface. Okay? And essentially, we came to the conclusion that we couldn't have the pre-sale that we wanted under those conditions. So there would have been a hard cap of about sort of 40 NFTs created in one transaction, and that transaction, if you were buying, so the lowest type of pack you can buy is a rare pack. Currently costs about $1.30, and it would have cost you closer to $10, probably even more than that. In fact, it could have been up to like $30-something dollars in gas, right? And so obviously it's fairly unacceptable to ask them to pay so much sort of extra fee based on the network. And it's obviously in the interest of us as a company to be able to sell packs all the time, and also in the interest of users, so that when they click the button, they don't have to think about, okay, well, this item is going to cost me so many dollars, but it's also going to cost me an additional fee of like all this money later. And so I'm going to have to worry about the gas price, and all that stuff adds UX friction, and it essentially makes the game less fun, right? It makes that whole pre-sale experience far less fun. Okay. The solution that we came up with is something which hasn't been tried before, and it's one that we came up with ourselves, and it's called, we call it activation. Essentially, it is a way of allowing users to have their purchase recorded on the blockchain, have all the data that's needed to generate the cards saved on the blockchain, and then to, rather than actually creating the cards in that same transaction, allow the users to create them later at a different time when the gas price is much lower, right? So separating the act of purchasing from the act of actually creating the tokens, right? Okay, and this has a number of sort of trade-offs, right? So this actually hurts UX when it comes to activation. Lots of people see the cards and they say, hey, I've purchased my pack, where are my ERC-721 tokens? And so part of our reaction to that has been improving our messaging about what activation is, why it exists, why people think that they're being charged an extra fee. But it also enables people to purchase really large numbers of packs and to get everything purchased in one transaction, right? So a few days ago, we had someone buy sort of 3,500 packs, and they can do that in one transaction with no hit to user experience. It costs the same amount of gas, which is about 5 to 10 cents, whether you're buying 5 cards, whether you're buying 17,000 cards, right? So,
I think our philosophy has been where we can give the user more control over the experience. So if you don't even want to trade some of these assets, you just want to purchase them for playing, say, in the tournament, you can do that, and you'll never have to, expand the computational resources necessary to manifest the token. You can just counterfactually own it, which is what we generally are on the side of.
So I suppose the first lesson that we learned while building Gods Unchained was trying to, as much as we could, give power back to the user to choose the time at which they wanted to engage with various stages of the process, to the time at which they wanted to purchase, not necessarily being the same time that they wanted to spend the gas costs to actually activate the cards for trading. And so we're very much, as a company and as sort of an engineering team, trying to focus on the ways in which we can empower people to make that system more effective. So in upcoming releases, we have things like, which will hopefully streamline this system even further, make it cheaper, allow people to do it for individual cards rather than packs, and all sorts of things like this. So that was the first technical challenge that we overcame, and the first sort of lesson we learned. The second one is related to, I'll say, both randomness and how we communicate delay times to the user. So when you purchase a Gods Unchained pack, what happens is we notice that you've purchased it so we receive an event. We have a sentinel that sort of watches what's going on the blockchain, says they've received an event. It then, our backend will fire a callback to the blockchain. So we send a second transaction, which is designed to so essentially together, those two transactions form a mechanism for generating randomness, which can't be manipulated by the user. Okay, and we send that transaction to the blockchain, and we use the combination of those two to generate the cards for the user. Okay? Unfortunately, this means that after the user's transaction is confirmed, they still don't have their cards, right? And so actually there's a couple of minutes delay time between when they hit the purchase button, when their transaction confirms, when we send the callback, when the callback has been confirmed, and then when the backend finally notices the event, the second event from the blockchain, and is able to send the call to the blockchain to predict their cards and to put them in packs so they can be shown.
I guess to take it back to basics, the premise is you can't generate a secure form of randomness in one transaction on a deterministic system, which blockchains are. So you can't, say that you want to purchase a certain amount of packs, and then in that same transaction, you'll generate a number which determines the rarity, if you get a diamond legendary or whatever, because were we to do that, you'd be able to, at time of execution, determine what you would have got, and only choose to send that transaction when it's beneficial toward you. So it kind of forces, and there are a few solutions, like there's obviously the third-party service Oracleize, which provides a callback transaction, so it is still a true transaction system, in order to operate, say, with the third world. So they can make an API request to Wolfram Alpha and say, give us the random number with X number of digits. We found that problematic for our user experience because being dependent on a third party means you don't have quality assurance over how quickly is this person going to get their packs. And also there are some fundamental technical difficulties with assuring the user that randomness is securely generated. So they use a form of notarization that's secure in some senses, but it's difficult to create an entirely secure way of representing off-chain information on the blockchain. If you solve that, you'll make $1 billion.
Essentially, it's a really good system for some use cases, but it wasn't so much for ours, and so we had sort of a lot of engineering on our end to build that out for ourselves, and obviously that requires quite a lot of investment. The real takeaway for you guys, I guess, is that we decided that we were going to not just sort of interact with this problem, and just tell users, okay, sit tight, wait a few minutes. But what we wanted to say to users is that we wanted to turn that time into an experience. Okay, and so this is an app this is a sort of a functionality that you see replicated in lots and lots of apps you probably use every day. If you use delivery apps for food, if you use Uber and things like that, just visualizing the idea of that something is coming towards you and that there's a progression being made turns that in and of itself from a big negative, which is sit tight for a few minutes and you'll probably get your packs, into wow, I can see every stage of that journey, right? And so we built out the infrastructure to allow ourselves to track that all the way through the stages, and we display it down the bottom of the screen as a tracker. And so even reflecting on how we could turn the UX challenges which crypto presents, which, I mean, given that people are used to being able to sort of purchase instantly, get their items instantly, and that's a big core component of UX for mobile games and things like that, trying to work out how we can balance the fact that in a crypto game with a valuable economy, we need this stuff. Okay.
So this is the question of the crypto master. How is it possible that NFTs would cost the same regardless of the number?
Okay. So this one is a bit of a technical question. The way that it works is that what actually costs gas is using the store of codes to store data on the blockchain, right? What we do when a user purchases a pack is all we store is, after the callback's made, the user, the purchase, and the randomness seed that we use to generate the cards, right? We can then send a call rather than a transaction to the blockchain. So transactions on Ethereum are things which change the state of the chain. So when a user sends something and they say, I'd like to buy 5 packs, then it generates, and it saves five for them, right? But if what we want to do is to set it up so that we can use a call transaction, a call rather than a transaction, which is read only, it can't modify the state of the blockchain. Essentially what we do is we say, if we were creating these cards for real, which cards would be created from that randomness seed? Okay, and so it gives us a big long list of all the cards, their IDs and things like that, which will be created, but it doesn't cost any gas for us to do that on the back end, right? It's executed instantly. It can be done on any node, and we'll get the same ones as we would when they send the final transaction to create the cards, right? And so it still costs the same amount of gas once you go to register each one of them separately, right? But essentially what we do is we say that anyone can send the transaction to register them separately. And so if we're predicting them based on that call to the blockchain, right, we can have assurance that the user, if they wanted to, could activate all those cards, right? And so they could have all those cards as individually registered tokens, right? But what we do is we let users see which cards they've got. We let them see like the order in which those cards came in. We let them play with their cards. We let them open them in packs. Then we let them choose which ones they'd like to go to that final registration process, right? So essentially, we want to give users control over which NFTs they actually turn from, hey, this one will potentially be generated if you send another transaction, to this one is a fully fledged ERC 721 token, right? So eventually they will become individually registered, but at the start they're not, and therefore we don't need to expend the same amount of gas, right? So clear everything up? This is a little bit complicated how this actually works, so feel free to message me if it's still confusing. Awesome.
It might be interesting to talk about first, Justin. How do you price the NFT tokens for the different parts and in-game components? Yeah, sure. So I was actually going to talk about this next, which is like the new economics of games designed around immutable player ownership. And it's fundamentally quite different to video games. So I guess to preface it, if you think about a game that you played recently, like a mobile game, what happens when you come back onto that mobile game after you've spent 2 weeks of it? You instantly get like an amazing chest where they give you a huge bunch of value that you'd otherwise pay a lot of money for free. The reasons they can do that is because when they give you that value, they're not inflating the overall economy. Every economic relationship is a closed loop between the publisher and each individual player, which means you can create infinite marginal value for people to extract just $1 more or 1 more cent, and it still makes sense in terms of the profitability of that relationship. As soon as you have an open economy, every decision you make with one player impacts the economic implications for everyone within that system. And so with the pricing, for instance, there's been a few different models going around for web experiences like dApps and such where the price increases over time or et cetera. For us, we decided to go with a standard flat pricing because we wanted everyone to have paid the same amount when the marketplace launches, so that there was nobody able to undercut the other person, for instance. In determining NFT tokens, I suppose it's a little bit arbitrary. It's sort of choosing your willingness to pay. We decided to go, we decided to create different prices which were reflecting value for the different types of demographics in the system. So you have people who just want to play the game, and so we priced it to be a very reasonably priced game, cheaper than Hearthstone in terms of packs, for the people who wanted to play it. We also created this system of allowing players to have more choice over what assets they unlock. So in comparable card games, if you want to get rare and valuable cards, you have to keep churning through the same pack in order to finally find your legendary, etc. We decided, look, that's hiding everything behind a bunch of bullshit about what the pack odds are, etc. It's incredibly manipulative and quite an opaque system. Why not just figure the expected value of what they're pricing, say, a legendary card at, and provide a pack that already incorporates that price into its value. So I think we, again, err on the side of our ethos being we want to give players more openness, more choice, and more transparency in terms of the way they're interacting with the ecosystem. From David, do we have a plan for fees on 0x? Will we announce the fees before the marketplace? Secondly, are we planning on importing orders from other relayers? And third, do we have plans for supporting community websites? Obviously, as I care about mine. David, you're from GUDEX. Yeah, awesome. Similar way you promote OpenSea Reddits. And finally, okay, a lot of questions. Let's go from the start. Do you want to pick the first one out?
So then we should. For context, guys, David runs GUDEX.com, which is one of our. We have quite a few community websites which community developers have built. One of the things that we really want to do is we want to consistently have a developer API which other people can use, so that they can use our assets in different contexts. They can provide functionality that does make sense for us, and that they can provide like lots of different UIs for players who want to interact with their items in different ways. Like some people prefer different kinds of deck builders, and obviously we can't build all the different types and put them in one interface. So having community websites is a really cool thing for us, and we think that it's a really great chance that these guys GDEX, and we've got a couple of other ones we've been offering really great features to our users, some of which has been marketplace content. Currently, we haven't locked in the fee structure that we've chosen, so we're also going to be running our own market for the games that we create ourselves, and we'll sort of have an Apollo marketplace that people can trade their items and things like that, and that will be a 0x relay, and we'll share liquidity with other marketplaces. We haven't yet decided on the fees that we will have, but we will announce those probably a little bit before the market opens.
They'll be low.
Yeah, they won't be very high fees. We're not looking to really take out a big percentage of the marketplace, of the value by charging.
A little bit of the fee you can take can be used to provide gas coverage for a bunch of convenience services that you do, such as covering the gas costs, transactions, etc., all which make it a much more frictionless experience for people interacting with it. On the third question, supporting community websites. So there's a few things to say. The first is in terms of putting things on the homepage. That's sort of in internal discussions. We've been advised to slow down the approach for some of the lawyers because of taking liability for third-party websites. But the second thing, and the really cool thing, and I hope this is working out, is that that's kind of how we envisage the referral system, is that it was this way for community websites to, in a decentralized manner, gain a share in the equity of the game and gain a reward for sort of their efforts for building an amazing and popular website. And I was at a talk yesterday by Olaf from Polychain, and he was talking about how he thinks a lot of the applications which are going to take over the future of decentralized spaces aren't simply going to be ports of centralized applications to the blockchain. In the same way that the killer app for information storage on the internet wasn't Encyclopedia Britannica Online. Obviously, there's some benefits: distribution, zero marginal cost of production, accessibility. But the killer app was the internet native version of Encyclopedia Britannica, which is obviously Wikipedia. And in the same way, I think that the coolest thing about the blockchain and a lot of things that are difficult to see ahead is what sort of blockchain native experiences or decentralized native experiences will emerge from crypto primitives as they're developed throughout the system. And what does a game that is sort of crypto native in its design look like? And part of my beliefs is that it's the ability to share equity in the game with early evangelists of the game, early adopters of that game, because they, in exchange for putting their time into providing feedback, building community websites, being an early adopter of the game, all these people help grow that game into becoming the popular service that it is. And finally, they can actually be rewarded fairly for their efforts with things like a decentralized referral scheme. Some of the cool ideas we also have is the ability to generate third-party content, whether that actually impacts the games or it's just skins, have that voted on by the community, and popular content could earn, say, like 10% of the actual revenue from that content as it's sold in the game. And eventually you could see entire crowdsourced designs for the production of these games. I think we're at the stage where we haven't seen many effective examples of completely crowd-designed games, and there is a degree of, unique one party driving the quality and core engagement of these games. But certainly things like third-party websites or third-party applications which build on the NFTs themselves is like one of our favorite things about the system.
Just quickly, so the answer to the second question is that yes, we'll import orders from other relayers, and to bring some more sort of concreteness to what Robbie was talking about there regarding community websites. One of the things that we're looking to do in the future is we'll set ourselves up as an OAuth provider so that community websites are able to implement sort of Apollo login on their own websites, which will enable sites like GDEX to, for instance, use the deck builder to create decks which automatically show up when a user's in game, and a whole bunch of other functionality. We're going to be quite invested in making sure that our community websites can not only continue to provide value, but have like a really meaningful status as part of our community.
Justin, we had our own database, which is a copy of the blockchain.
Yeah, so essentially, it's not feasible for us to, for two reasons, we don't directly go to the blockchain when we display the NFTs to the user. Firstly, not all the assets are NFTs yet. So one of the trade-offs of that activation system I described earlier is that simply getting tokens off user won't return all the assets that we need that we want to show to the user. And secondly, it won't put them in packs and things like that. So we can't just rely on that. And secondly, we need speed, right? And so users have, like I talked about at the beginning, one of the things that we did was saying that we wanted to have a game that users would play even if it wasn't on the blockchain. And so one of the things that requires is that users get the same UX in terms of viewing their inventory, in terms of opening packs that they would in a traditional game. And that requires caching everything and serving it in the same way that a traditional game. From Adam asking whether we're running our own relay. Yes, we will run our own relayer. We'll be utilizing the asset buyer method to streamline marketplace UX for takers. We haven't decided on our exact flow for marketplace takers, but that's probably one of the options that we'll be exploring. We'll explore everything that we can do to try to make both sort of buying and selling as streamlined as possible, and that will include we want to have things like selling decks at the same time, so that people are able to really use. Part of what we see the role of our marketplace is that we can provide game-specific functionality which makes sense in the context of Gods on Change, and that makes sense in the context of future games.
We wanted to, one of the cool things is that they have the same properties as favorite cards, like your Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon cards. And so we wanted to recreate the possibilities of trading that you would do, with your friends or at a convention with stalls where you can package your own cards, etc., etc. We wanted to kind of allow those possibilities and really personalize the feel of the marketplace as well. So hopefully there's something awesome to show you guys.
Yeah, essentially, one of our key sort of evangelistic ideals is that we want to sort of combine the really good things about digital cards. You can play with them anywhere. You can be able to, so you can play with them anywhere. You don't have to worry about them getting lost or damaged. They look beautiful on screen, so you can have 3D effects. You can have voice effects. You don't have to have memorized the rules of the game. You don't need to keep looking up a rule book. All the great things about digital card games, right? And merge that with the best things about physical card games. So things like true trading, things like you being able to put your stuff in a box and just hold on to it for as long as you want. All those sorts of things which have made physical card games so successful and so appealing. And we see ourselves as being able to bring the best of both worlds in that sense. So that's one of the ways in which we try to explain that to people.
David, it'll be on both. And CryptoMaster, do we plan to design all the game mechanics ourselves, or do we plan to white label the technology to other game designers? So we certainly are designing the game mechanics ourselves. We have, as you know, an awesome team of designers. In terms of making a call, I probably can't speak to our future actions on that in the future. It's obviously a really cool possibility, one we're really interested in exploring, because the open possibilities of exactly licensing, say, multiple versions of the games which operate on the same NFTs is a fundamentally fascinating one. And also speaks to how perhaps the future of gaming is someone who designs the protocol of, I guess you could argue, a primitive of crypto gaming is going to be the assets themselves. Say, the properties of a sword. And then the platforms which can be built upon that are all the different use cases in which that sword could be played in the game. So it's a really interesting possibility. I think for the moment, we're not trying to take on there's lots of ambitious companies in the space with very long horizons. We're one of those, but we're also keeping a very short-term focus in terms of executing really well on what we're currently doing. We want to make an incredible game experience, incredible ancillary experiences to support that, such as the marketplace. And so those are really our core focuses, as well as porting to mobile and providing all the things we're committed to first before we look at sort of these ultimate stretch goals.
And so Adam, the database. So essentially, we have a whole bunch of long-running backend processes set up, which monitor the transfer event, and a bunch of other ones as well to set up the activation system. We monitor the transfers of cards between players, and then we query that instead of making a Web3 call. Lets us do it just much faster and in a much more meaningful way. So some of our users, for instance, have almost 100,000 cards, right? And returning that data, trying to get that data off the blockchain is it's quite annoying, and we can't do it fast enough what we want. And so what we essentially do is we cache everything in a sort of via our APIs. Yeah.
I might go back to an earlier question Justin had about sort of pricing as well, which brings up an interesting question, which is how do you design your economics such that you're not cannibalizing your own market and not cannibalizing your own sales, and you're also providing space for players to set their own value in the third-party marketplace. Because obviously, say you're selling a sword, and when you sell that sword, it's tradable, and then players are also selling that sword. If there's nothing to distinguish the properties of those swords, people can either come to you, the publisher, for access to their swords, like the central bank, the mint, or they can go to the player marketplace directly. And either you are going to be at better value, in which case you're making money at the expense of your marketplace, or your marketplace is better value, in which case there's no point for you selling them in the first place. And so it's this interesting design. And it's sort of how we came up with our idea of we should make it so that during the first season of cards, they're non-tradable, which allows us to make changes to the balance of those cards in a way which doesn't impact prices which people have already paid specifically for those assets. If you paid for an amazing card which was super useful for your meta deck, you don't want that to be suddenly nerfed because it's found to be imbalanced, and then suddenly it's no longer useful for your meta. You've already paid for it. We can't refund you because everything's immutable. But we also want it so that once we give you your cards and once you can start trading them, you're no longer competing with us, the central bank. You're guaranteed that we will never again publish those same prints like a limited edition run of Magic the Gathering cards. And so I think this new seasonal model is probably going to be one that remains fundamentally quite interesting. There are other ways we've also been exploring, such as the creation of assets in game. It's very difficult to do the same thing that normal games do, which is price real-world valuable assets and pay for them with time. So when you play a game like Fortnite that's free to play, everything in that game is generally acquirable with time. It may be a lot of time, you may be working to the equivalent of 50 cents an hour, but you can do it. As soon as you then make those assets tradable, you incentivize people to do civil attacks with bots, which generate a number of these assets for free. The only way to mitigate that is with either A, a really effective capture system, which seems bizarre to put into a game, or B, making them pay some cost basis for an expected value of a range of potential items they can win from, say, a tournament. So it would work well if you paid a $10 entrance fee to a tournament and you had the chance to win $1,000 worth of goods, and there's $1,000 contributed in total. So the like economic value paid by the market is fair in that scenario. Finally, this question from Joe Master: taking aspects of US side, game mechanics, game theory, and product is key in making successful. How do you minimize the risk of that aspect of the business? Higher investing. I don't touch the game mechanics and game theory. I touch the new economics of designing games with immutable ownership. Alex builds some of the amazing engineering with the team of engineers upstairs as well. And in terms of the game mechanics and game theory itself, we leave most of experts. So Highway and James Wakeman are both incredible game designer minds, and the minds behind the most successful third-party balancing application for Hearthstone. So I guess the answer to the question is find people who are much better than you. And
yeah, I mean, so that's definitely like the core of what we do. We also have a whole bunch of analytics set up surrounding the composition of decks, the turn on which various cards are played, the average win rate of particular decks, all that sort of analytics stuff, which obviously doesn't give us a definitive information which is actionable in terms of balancing changes, but can help to suggest problems, particularly as the game, as because often cards will be balanced at different levels of play, and so cards which won't be balanced when top players with a certain elo play each other will be balanced at the lower levels, and sort of we try to use the data that we can get from lots and lots of people playing the game. We have QA teams playing it. We have all the people who are currently in beta, and we'll have many more people in the weeks and months to come, and channeling that data into something which is actionable for our really competent game designers is how we mitigate that risk, essentially.
NFTs for reputation badges. I may ask for a bit of clarification, but I do know of a team very early in the space. I'm not sure if I should say the name. In terms of, I don't know how confidential the product is. That's working on proof of location based NFTs. So, like, say you went to a stadium or a sporting match, you could carry your NFT with you, and you could like sign it with the provider at that location, and then you could have this sort of record of events you've been to, which is a cool idea that perhaps is touching on that.
I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I mean, one immediate issue might be the fact that if those NFTs are therefore going to be tradable, then enabling people to trade reputation might depend on how the system is set up to work, right? If you can exchange, if you cash in your reputation, then it might make some economic sense. But if it was like other people who might not have a good reputation were able to purchase large amounts of reputation and use that in negative ways, then it might not be the most effective system. So it would depend on what the goal of the reputation system was to achieve.
And Crypto Master, we hired, so we're 25 full time now.
Robbie and Alex, thank you so much. This has been amazing. We're closing up on 45 minutes here, so I think that we can wrap it up. We don't want to take up too much of your time. Where can everyone here find out more about Fuel Games, all of the games you guys are making, and any technical documentation?
Yeah, so finding more about Fuel Games, probably the best source of information is currently our Medium blog. We'll have a own version of our blog coming out soon as well. In terms of the game, check out godsonchain.com, has heaps of content on there. And reach out to our Twitter, as Tyler, who manages that, just loves to talk to people. That's his job. So,
yeah, anyone who's got any technical questions or wants to get in touch regarding help with our developer APIs, we have developer API documentation on GitHub, which is largely up to date. We'll probably update it in the future. But if you've got any specific questions, my email is alex@fuelgames.io. Feel free to get in touch, particularly if you're thinking about building something in our ecosystem.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.